can I just ask you guys one simple question? What is more fun than ranking the towers in a tower defense game? Ranking the bosses. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the next YouTube video. I'm your host, Pollux the Wise, and in today's episode, we are going to be ranking the Kingdom Rush franchise bosses. So, starting off on the list, Godieth the Infernal from Kingdom Rush Origins. He's in a post-game mini-campaign. I should say post-main campaign, because it's one of the extras. But, man, this guy's tough. I'm not going to lie. Super difficult. Well-balanced enemies. I like this guy a lot. I like his design a lot. He does make challenges quite difficult, though. He is immediately going into S+ for me. The reason for this is just because of, well, actually, a number of things. First off, the artwork. Looks great, and I love the setting. All right, looks like we're in some kind of underground volcanic area. Really super cool. I like how this guy is literally on fire when he comes out of, on the final wave. It's pretty freaking sweet. He's got a cool looking weapon. And honestly, the enemies that accompany him are quite challenging, and it really forces you to kind of be on your toes as far as your strategy is concerned and how you beat Godieth himself. Whether it means you're killing the supporting troops first and then him, or whether you're just trying to focus all of your firepower on him from the get-go and keep everybody else behind. He's a very difficult boss to play against, and that is why he's going straight up to S+ for us. By the way, we are ranking these bosses on a number of things, not just difficulty, but also just balance and, how overall the play style and just gameplay feels when going up against a particular boss. Vez'nan the Hateful. Again, another post-game in Origins, or I should say a post-game level in Origins. This guy is, again, going to S+ immediately. This guy, super memorable boss fight. Probably, arguably, one of the hardest, if not the hardest bosses ever. I'm not even joking. This guy might be the hardest boss ever. Why do I say this? First of all, this guy's attacks are ridiculously strong. He can heal himself by a crazy amount of hit points. His supporting units are probably the most annoying in the game. You've got Twilight Golems, which are basically almost immune to almost all insta-kills. You've got the Elite Harassers, which are just that. They're literally annoying as heck. They suck. But they are very challenging to deal with. If you play this level just vanilla, it's difficult. But if you play it as a challenge, if you're spamming one tower type only or using just certain towers and a hero, it's even more challenging. Okay? This level is like one of the pinnacle peaks of difficulty. It's a very good boss fight, very memorable. The layout and scenery is kind of meh. Some of the enemy wave compositions are kind of meh. They're kind of repeating and reusing a lot of the enemies from the third act of the main campaign, to be honest. So it does lose a couple points for that. But other than that, a very well-rounded boss fight. Very difficult, very challenging, very fun. It makes you feel like you're actually struggling for a little bit. And like you have to concentrate in order to beat this guy, right? So you're not just going to sit back and it's going to be a piece of cake. Next up on the chopping block, ladies and gents, we have King Xizzy, King Rexy's brother-in-arms, shall we say. So, King Xizzy, not the most difficult boss fight in the world for sure. He's very easily susceptible to magic towers, whether it's Necromancer spam or Archmage spam. You can even beat this guy with archers only. Surprisingly, battle mechas only cannot defeat King Xizzy. I thought that was extremely interesting. Same thing with dwarfs, obviously, and all barracks. If you can beat that level with all barracks, I will literally give you like $100 because there's no way you're even going to be able remotely getting anywhere close to the boss fight, let alone beat King Xizzy with his medium armor and his ground attack that not only deals area damage but affects all units within a huge range. You thought the range of the freaking Saurian death coils was big? This guy's attack is nuts, okay? And the closer he is to units, the more damage he deals. It's just ridiculous. But where are we going to rank this guy? Honestly, I would say that it's not a super memorable boss fight. Again, probably because of just the difficulty. But the Saurian death coils being in that level really makes challenges quite difficult. Especially barracks only, no lives lost on veteran. That's just like literally impossible. So because of that, I'm going to put King Xizzy B tier. He is a difficult boss in some instances, but for the most part, not super memorable, not the most difficult boss in the world. Next up, we've got the Twin Ancient Ghosts. Okay, this boss fight just sucks. I'm sorry. This was a... I mean, okay, so you've got two different figures, right? So you've got the magic immune ghost over here, the physically immune ghost over here. Literally just switch your towers to accommodate whichever path they're going down, and you're going to melt them. These guys are not that difficult, not that challenging, and quite honestly, you can beat them in most challenges where you're just spamming one tower type for the most part. So these guys, I mean, I'll give them a little bit of props because their supporting minions are somewhat difficult to deal with, so they're not quite F-, in my opinion. I'm just going to put them at F tier, but only because of their supporting minions. Castle Blackburn. Really memorable boss fight. You have a lot of lanes to defend, very difficult early game, and quite honestly, Blackburn himself is a challenging boss. Not only does he have good armor, he's got a decent amount of hit points, and he can disable your towers. He also has a stunning mechanic for your reinforcements, your heroes, your earth elementals, which actually makes it very difficult to stall him, which makes him that much more threatening. His supporting minions are very threatening as well. You know, Abominations, the Spectral Knights, and the Fallen Knights are very difficult to deal with as well. Lycans can be a big problem if you're not adequately set up for, you know, your defenses at that point. Hopefully by the time you get to Lord Blackburn, though, your defenses would be pretty strong. But I would say this is definitely one of the top tier boss fights on my list. I got to put this guy at S tier. The thing that he loses a couple points with for me is, unfortunately, it is actually pretty easy to spam towers of almost any type to beat him. You can do archers only on that level. You can do mages only on that level. It's actually not that hard. Obviously, artillery only would just wreck Lord Blackburn, at least his supporting minions anyways. I don't know about the boss himself. I haven't tried that challenge yet, but I imagine you can get pretty far just spamming artillery. Next up on the chopping block, we have Bulgur himself, the Iron Man king of sorts, in his robotic throne. I love how there was a unique little detail in the level where if you watch as he unplugs himself from, or I shouldn't say unplugs, he unplugs the throne from its like stationary spot. There's like a little electrical outlet. I just thought that was something kind of funny in the level. Don't know how many people noticed that, but Bulgur for the most part is a pretty easy boss fight. There are some towers that make it difficult to spam. If you're doing barracks only, no lives lost on impossible, I actually did kind of need to get a little bit lucky and spammed Dark Knights with tier 1 insta-kills. Orc Warrior's Den straight up didn't even work. They died too quickly, and they just respawned too slow. So Dark Knights, for anybody who wants to try that challenge, you can actually do it with Azra and Dark Knight spam, but you do need to get a little bit lucky with them killing the Mecha Dwarves, surviving Bulgur's hits, and yeah, that's pretty much that. But as far as difficulty is concerned, not super difficult. I like the mechanic where he can steal your gold if you try and save up too much of it. So he does get some points for that. I like that mechanic. Very interesting. I kind of wish bosses had a little bit more of something like that. So it kind of forces you to spend your gold on defense more than you'd like to. And you can't really save up too much money at any particular time. So you kind of have to just spend it and hope that your defense holds down for the majority of the waves. So for that reason and that reason alone, I'm going to put him at D tier. Again, I like the aesthetic looks. The artwork is, of course, phenomenal, as is most of the art in Kingdom Rush Vengeance. Very beautifully well done. But for the most part, Bulgur is not a very difficult boss. Most towers can wreck him. And even if you're doing challenges, he's not super difficult. Next up, we have Bram the Beheader. Okay, this guy, not going to lie, he's kind of just meh. He really is. Like, the boss himself is not that difficult. I think what catches some people off guard is his speed. He does move pretty quickly for a boss. And he actually has the ability to just insta-kill, just fling your troops and hero off the map. So that is somewhat mildly annoying. If you let him get too far down the path and don't stall him adequately, he can be troublesome to deal with, especially close to the exit. The minions in his level, though, dear God, are the worst. Just no. Why? Who made Blood Knolls? This is not cool. I'm not happy. I'm frog and angry. Blood Knolls suck, but they do make the level challenging. Ogre Magi's make the level challenging. Blood Ogres make the level challenging, as do the Ettins. Ettins, believe it or not, also very challenging in that level. The Perithans in that level are also challenging. There's just so many annoying minions in that level. So for that reason, I'm going to put him at C tier. He's not quite as memorable as King Xizzy, to be honest with you guys. I just was not a huge fan of this boss fight. Not saying that it's necessarily hard or difficult. It's just not super memorable for me. Next up, we have Gerald Lightseeker. Super memorable boss. And actually quite difficult to do not only vanilla gameplay, but also in challenges, at least for me anyways. So, especially if you're like handicapping yourself, I know I did a challenge with Functional Function where we played this level, actually I think a couple times, and this was a very difficult level for us to try and conserve our budget while also trying to beat each other on not only time, but the number of lives that we had at the end of the level. So, a very interesting wave composition and a good variety of enemies during the boss fight. Gerald himself is actually quite difficult to deal with if you use certain towers. Given the fact that he has high armor, he can heal himself, kind of like Vez'nan in a sense that he has that same mechanic, but certainly less damage. But overall, I like the design of the level. I like the design of Gerald himself. When he comes out and he's got his battle armor on and he'll take his helmet off so he can heal up, and it just looks super cool. But overall, I would say as far as difficulty is concerned, it's moderately somewhat difficult. I'm going to put Gerald at A tier. He's pretty decent. Yes, Greenmuck. Greenmuck is a bit of a pickle to rank because for the most part, he himself is just that, a walking tank. His area attack that can hit all barrack units on the battlefield and summon in more husks for you to deal with is pretty easily solved. Just don't use barracks. Okay, I know that sounds kind of crazy, but literally just use reinforcements in your hero. That's it. You don't need barracks for that level. I don't even think it's possible to beat that level with only barracks, though. Good luck. If somebody can do it, hey, be my guest. I would be amazed if you could. But I will just say Greenmuck himself is not very difficult. It's his supporting minions. Again, kind of like Bram the Beheader or, Lord Blackburn. But unlike Lord Blackburn, Greenmuck himself is not that difficult. But you've got the Treants. Treants just constantly getting spammed. They have high armor, a good amount of hit points. You've got the Swamp Things. You've got all the demons that if you try and stall any of those big tanky units, the demons are just going to blow up the rest of your army. So you really need a decent hero for that level, and definitely a decent set of towers and defenses set up before the boss fight begins. I would say Greenmuck probably is B tier. Somewhat memorable of a boss fight, because I like the look and the aesthetics of the level. I like how there's the portal in the middle of the rotten forest. You've got the 3 lanes converging into 2, converging into 1. So that is interesting. And I like having those little pools of swamp where you can summon enemies if your reinforcements die, or at least the enemies can summon more husks and swamp things if your troops and units die. Next up, I'm actually going to switch over to the bottom here because I just want to get this next one out of the way. The Winter Queen. This boss fight is so easy. F-. Just straight up. I don't even need to explain why this is a bad boss. I'm just kidding. I'm going to explain why. First of all, the wave composition is pathetic. And for the most part, there may be like one wave in that entire level where it's challenging. Otherwise, it's a joke. Secondly, the boss herself doesn't really do much of anything. Yeah, she's got an area attack. Yeah, she can freeze your towers. It's mildly annoying, but it's basically the same thing as a certain someone else who I'm about to rank pretty soon here, actually. And she just doesn't have good lines. Her design is meh. Honestly, she kind of looks like a certain somebody else, who I'm hovering my mouse over here, and we'll get to that later. But yeah, she just floats along the path, doesn't do much of anything. Actually, a lot of bosses in this game float. These two float, this one floats, or I should say levitates. But she's not a great boss, not difficult at all to kill, very easy level, not super memorable whatsoever. Her supporting minions at times can be a little mildly annoying, but that's if you literally just don't know how to handle them, okay? Literally just study the wiki. I promise you won't regret it. It makes this boss fight super, super easy. Next up on the chopping block, Vez'nan, a super iconic boss battle. And Vez'nan himself is pretty tanky. However, he's unfortunately not super difficult to kill. The waves, the composition is not the most difficult or challenging. There may be like one tower type that struggles a little bit, and that's mages only. If you use like only arcane wizards, that's going to be a problem. But, like, even using Sorcerer Mages and just spamming Earth Elementals, I was able to get through the level, no lives lost. Even when it came to the Necromancers and the Spider Swarms, the Skeleton Knight spam, it just really wasn't that difficult of a level. So I'm going to say, just for nostalgia's sake, and because he was the first final boss of the Kingdom Rush franchise, we're going to put Vez'nan at A tier. Next up, we have Vasil. Love this guy's voice lines. Love the music during all the Kingdom Rush Frontier boss fights, let's be honest. It's freaking awesome. I should have said the same thing about Xizzy, but unfortunately that didn't earn him a higher score. Any case, Vasil, the vampire prince, or king, or whatever the heck you want to call him. I think he's a prince. No, I think that's what the description on, I think it's mobile, says. I'd have to verify that, but in any case, love the level. The level design, the artwork, absolutely phenomenal. I love how the enemies fly out of the towers, the Vampiressa. They just fly onto the path. Really super cool mechanic there. Kind of wish that happened more during other boss fights to kind of make it a little bit more difficult. However, Vasil himself, again, same thing. Once you get the Vampiressa either in front of or behind Vasil and you kill those first couple groups in front of him or that come out with him on the left side, crossbow bolt barrage just absolutely shreds Vasil. He's very easy to kill. And once he starts going down the right side away from his Vampiressa, where he has even less enemy units tanking for him, he's just that much easier to kill that much more quickly. However, he does move faster, and his Death Aura will kill your heroes and reinforcements almost instantaneously. So overall, the boss fight is very well done. Vasil himself is moderately difficult, but not super tanky by any means necessary. His supporting minions, however, especially on wave 15, when you have the Lycan spam, if you do not have Bolt Barrage, well, good luck getting ready to deal with all those lives being leaked. It's very easy to underestimate, you know, the last couple waves. It's super, super difficult. The early game is super, super difficult. I'm stuttering over my words here because I'm trying to think of what to say next. But in any case, where are we going to rank this bad boy? I'm going to go with A tier. I think it's one of the most well-balanced boss fights. I love the artwork. I love the music. Great boss fight overall. Not the best, but definitely one of the better ones. Next up, we have Umbra. Probably one of the most annoying bosses ever to face because you go, oh, here, let's just fight this little blob of darkness. Oh my god, he deleted my towers. Oh my god, he can delete my towers. Yeah, I know, it's crazy, isn't it? In addition to that, he can summon groups of up to like 6 Shade Elementals on each path at the same time. It's ridiculous. And he summons like 2 or 3 groups of those at a time. It's nuts, right? So if you don't know what you're doing, this boss can be very difficult to kill. You kind of need to get through the first phase slowly, and then the last 2 phases of him very, very quickly. So he gains some points, kind of like Vez'nan, who has a second phase. Umbra has 3 phases. Actually, I think he has the most phases out of any boss fight like ever. Vasil has 2, Vez'nan has 2, but Umbra has 3. Does it really make him that much more difficult to kill, though? It kind of depends. It depends on what challenge you're doing. If you're doing a challenge versus vanilla gameplay, personally, I don't think that this guy's certainly not the worst boss fight ever. Again, the music gives him props, but I'm going to say he's probably about as difficult and memorable as King Xizzy is. He's not super great, you know? He's decently challenging, but for the most part, you can kill him, relatively speaking, easily. And I would say that other than his mechanic of destroying towers and reforming himself 2 or 3 times, you know, that can be problematic at certain points in time. But other than that, I don't really have much else to say about this guy. He's decent, but he's not great. Olga Kai, the Warlord of the Trolls. Love this guy. I like the Hakraj Nation in general. They are great. They have some great units. Probably, honestly, one of my favorite factions in Kingdom Rush, if not my most favorite. Very difficult to kill because of his regenerative abilities. But instead of it being like Vasil or, you know, freaking, what's his face? Gerald Lightseeker or Umbra, where he reforms a lot of his HP all at once, Olga Kai does it very slowly over time. But that being said, it is still very constant like any other troll, which just makes him that much more difficult to kill. Also, he's immune to damage while he's moving. So you have to block him with strong units to get him to take damage from other towers. So having stuff like Earth Elementals or Holy Orders with maxed out healing and high armor is pretty much an essential unless you're using some strong hero to tank for quite a while, such as Hacksaw, who has medium armor, or Gerald Lightseeker, who can get up to high armor. Overall, the level is pretty difficult, right? If you don't have the right towers, snipers with sniper shot, musketeers with sniper shot, and, death rays, or the sorcerer mage's polymorphs, so you can click on the sheep to kill them. Troll breakers are actually probably one of the most threatening enemies in that particular level, along with the troll pathfinders, right? So they're going down a completely separate path for the most part. They go around that little bend to the right of the middle of the level, and then they go straight down the middle bottom area. And they can slip through quite easily if you're not careful, right? So you've got two paths converging into one, splitting into two again, and then in the meantime, you've got this one path that's slithering across the whole middle section of your defenses. But that being said, is the boss fight itself super, super difficult? Not really. If you can make it to Olga Kai himself, generally speaking, by that point, you will have a decent amount of defenses set up, and it should be relatively easy to take him down. The key thing is to either try and stall him, get rid of the troll champions that are by him, or just, make sure that he's alone and separated from the rest of his army before taking him on. He does move pretty slowly, and that does give you quite a bit of time to get rid of the rest of the units and take him on. So where are we going to rank this bad boy? I'm probably going to say A tier. Not the most difficult boss in the world, but still very memorable and a very challenging level at certain points in time. Next up, we have Bandit's Lair, the Kingpin. Okay. I mean, this guy is just badass. He doesn't even have to get off his butt. He literally just rides in a giant cart and eats chicken. Or is it turkey? Duck, whatever. I don't care, whatever. He eats some kind of piece of meat off a leg. This guy's badass. I'm not gonna lie. Look at this. Look at this gold chain. He's just like, bro, I don't care whatsoever. I'm just chilling. They see me rolling. They're hating, patrolling, and try to catch me riding dirty. The minions in his boss fight are more difficult than he is himself. I mean, that's the case for a lot of bosses, but with him more so than others because you have the raiders, you have the pillagers having high magic resistance, and the raiders having great armor. They get spammed quite a bit. Yes, you can use magic to take care of them, but if you're doing challenges such as barracks only or, freaking, what was I going to say? Archers only or artillery only, it's actually quite difficult to take him down effectively. But that being said, I would probably put him in the same tier as King Xizzy and all these other guys, only because he is actually a moderately difficult boss to kill. If you don't manage his minions carefully, they can overwhelm you, and you can end up very easily losing lives, even early on in the level. So, next up on the chopping block, we have the Juggernaut, the first boss of the Kingdom Rush franchise and of the original edition of Kingdom Rush. Juggernaut is not that difficult to get through at all. He just isn't a difficult boss. The Dark Knights can be a little bit annoying at times. Shadow Archers, same thing goes for them. But other than those two enemies, if you can manage those, everything else in that level is a piece of cake. And the boss himself, pretty much a piece of cake. But for nostalgic purposes, I'm not going to put him on the lower two tiers. I'm going to give him D tier. But again, not a super memorable boss fight. He's just okay. Next up, we're going to switch back here because we're on the final row of bosses. I think this guy's name is Golfoac. I'm ashamed to say I don't honestly remember, but I think it's Golfoac. Not a super memorable boss level, to be honest. Not the best. I mean, the boss concept, him riding a giant boar. What? That doesn't even make sense. Why are you riding a giant boar? And the fact that you can just heal your troops is like the most useless ability you've ever given a boss. Like, why do you exist? I mean, your supporting minions are more difficult than you. I mean, for God's sake. I mean, look at this guy. See, when the Kingpin rides in his little four-wheeler, it looks cool. But when you ride a giant pig, you just look like a giant pig. You're like a giant green little hobbit on top of a giant brown pig. You're terrible. I'm gonna put you at F tier. Good sir. All right. I'm just gonna pick you out randomly. JT. This boss fight, if you do challenges such as barracks only, for example, or if you do something like artillery only actually can be somewhat kind of difficult. I'm not going to lie. The Yetis are actually surprisingly easy to underestimate. Same thing goes for the Dark Slayers. Rocket Riders, which for some reason the rest of the community seems to think they are like one of the most, if not the most annoying enemies in Kingdom Rush 1. I disagree with that personally. I don't think they're that difficult at all to deal with, even in a barracks-only challenge. At that point, you've got barbarians with throwing axes. It's pretty easy to take them down if you ask me. JT himself, his ability to freeze your towers is somewhat annoying, but honestly, if you just stall him close to the top of the map, he's very easy to slow down because of the fact that he pauses to regain his breath. He walks very slowly. He'll pause to eat your soldiers or your hero. Very easy to lock this boss in place and kill him. Other than that, he's kind of just like JT, or the Juggernaut. He's just a bit of a meat shield. His goons are a little bit more threatening than the golem heads that JT spawns, but honestly, I don't think that's enough to get him to a higher tier than the same one that Juggernaut is on. So we're going to put Mr. JT, Juggernaut's brother as far as initials are concerned, on the same tier. Hyena. Alright, so the first boss from Kingdom Rush Origins. This guy has medium armor, which can make him actually a little bit difficult to deal with in challenges. Artillery only on that level, no lives lost, out of the question. Get ready to get wrecked by every single Python, like within 5 miles. Constantly spamming you with troops and everything. This is just freaking ridiculous, man. I mean, maybe through some clutch plays it is quite possibly possible, but I doubt it. That was some great English there. Good job. Anyways, not a super memorable boss fight, though. I like the scenery. I like the mechanic that you have the 2 griffins that can spew flames on the path. That's a nice little added feature. Kind of wish that we had something more like that during boss fights, and I wish it had happened more frequently during Hyena, but I feel like that would have just made it somewhat too easy to just cheese the level. You're just spamming griffins along the entirety of the path the entire time. But yeah, Griffin's Point, not the best boss fight, but definitely not the worst either. It can be mildly challenging at certain points. We're going to give this guy C tier. Next up on the chopping block, Jakul's Nest. So Jakul, I actually had to look at the wiki to figure out how much hit points this guy has. And I was astonished to see it was quite a bit. I don't remember the exact number, but it was actually more than most of the bosses. Actually, I think almost all the bosses on this tier list. Some of them even combined. So Jakul actually has the most hit points. And in terms of size, Jakul is actually, I think, the largest boss. Might even be bigger than Vez'nan in his demon form, which is just absolutely nuts. I think Serogas is probably maybe not quite as big, but close in size comparison to Jakul. Leviathan might also come close, but still. But Jakul. This boss fight was quite unique. I will give it that. The layout of the level is kind of just meh. The paths are very easy to defend. Very simple. You literally just spam Bone Flingers and Spectre's Mausoleum, folks. It's not complicated. I would say that this boss fight, in terms of difficulty, for the most part, is just not that challenging. Even if you want to do something with no lives lost, not that difficult to get through the majority of this level. The other thing I will say, though, is that, again, it earns some bonus points for originality purposes as far as having those cannons that you use to kill the boss. But I also feel like that just makes it super easy. Just being able to take out a huge chunk of Jakul's health, even with the reload time. All you have to do is just defend the enemies until the cannons recharge. They really don't take that long. So I would probably say that just for the purpose of having unique cannon mechanics, we're going to give this D tier. But otherwise, very easy boss fight, not very memorable at all. Leviathan. Okay, so you suck, and your minions suck even more because I hate them. Black Surges can just go jump off a cliff, and Blood Shells, you can go die in a corner because you ruined Archer's Only No Lives Lost on Veteran for me. I am still trying to beat that, even on just casual. Yeah, I know, right? When's the last time Pollux ever played anything on casual? But seriously, this guy is a joke. The boss himself, joke. His minions are more difficult than he is. But only for those 2 or 3 enemies that are super difficult. It's Blood Shells, the Blue Gales, and the Black Surges. I'm going to put this D tier. But honestly, in my opinion, as a boss himself, I would rank him lower. If it were not for his minions, F or F minus. The only other reason he even gets D tier is because of the music and because the level itself is kind of difficult to defend both paths at once. It can be a little difficult to manage your money as far as, where you're spending it. Next up, we have the Unseelie Court. I don't remember this queen's name. Malicia? What the heck is your name? See, this is my point. I don't even remember this boss fight. I don't remember the boss's name. She's somewhat difficult in challenges. I will give her that. But for the most part, you can cheese her level with pretty much almost any tower type. The one exception might be magic. That is somewhat difficult to do. But other than that, really not complicated, guys. This level is just not very memorable at all. Is she the worst boss ever? No. Her supporting minions are pretty difficult to deal with if you're not careful. You've got the fungus breeders. You've got the, it's the big purple rolling balls. What are they called? Bandersnatches. Thank God I have somewhat of a brain that I can remember this stuff. I'm going to give her C tier. C tier because of her minions. But otherwise, she's just a meh boss. She can disable your towers and stuff sometimes, so that's kind of interesting. But other than that, not too much to write home about. Speaking of another boss that's very similar to her, the Spider Goddess. I'm actually going to put her C tier because her level is somewhat difficult, kind of like Bram the Beheader. But again, the boss herself, super easy. Not much really else to say about this. Again, I like the artwork and everything. Boss music is okay. It's not great. But yeah, there's that. All right, Moloch, the brother of Olga, the demon from Kingdom Rush Vengeance. But this guy is from Kingdom Rush the original edition. In Pandemonium, some would say it's one of the most difficult levels ever. And they're not wrong. It is a very difficult level to beat, at least early game. The fact that War Champion did this with no lives lost on Veteran with barracks only is nuts. Okay? If you haven't watched that video, go watch it right now. And you don't even need to watch most of it. Just skip to the parts where Cerberus comes out on, I think, like wave 9 or 10, and then skip ahead to the boss fight. You're going to see how difficult it gets close to the end. I mean, he comes this close to losing lives, and he still pulls out a clutch victory. I don't think anybody will ever do a harder challenge than what War Champion did with that video. That was just nuts, okay? Just for that, this guy immediately goes up to A tier for me, all right? It's a difficult level. The enemies are difficult. Every single one of them can explode, except for maybe, I think, demon imps, and just kill your army. Very difficult to stall, very difficult to kill a lot of those enemies. You have to really know what you're doing in the early game, or you are just dead lost by, wave 3 or 4. You're going to start losing lives. That is just pretty much guaranteed. Myconid. Okay, the Shroom King. Honestly, they could have done a lot more with this boss fight. Not super memorable. Very easy to kill this guy. Challenges, he can be somewhat problematic. But other than that, I mean, the enemies that they introduce, it's not that great of a boss fight. The paths and the tower spots are kind of meh. I will say it is difficult early game. Kind of like Pandemonium to defend. But once you get past early game, the late game is just a piece of cake. Once you have 1 or 2 Teslas up, the majority of the enemies that are coming down towards the bottom exit path, it's just simply you haven't won the level at that point, but you're pretty close to it. I like the mechanic where he spawns a bunch of rot shrooms after he dies, kind of alluding to the boom shrooms spawning from munshrooms and munshrooms spawning from, fungus shrooms when they die. I honestly think that these two groups might be related, and we will go more into that lore later on. But as far as a boss fight is concerned, this guy is just pathetic. I got to put him... Only because of the difficulty of the early game itself, I'm going to give him D tier. But I'd be tempted to put him in F tier. Nazarus Gates. Nazaru, the genie. Obviously, he gets bonus points automatically for just having good boss fight music. The level is actually somewhat difficult, even in vanilla gameplay, because you need to manage your money carefully on both sides to deal with highly armored enemies and the Doom Terrors and Scorpions combination that comes out the right side in a couple waves. So As long as you manage your towers and your gold carefully, the level's not too difficult, but it can be somewhat tricky at times. The boss fight himself, Nazarus is not the greatest boss in the world. Super easy to kill for the most part. He can disable up to like 3 towers at a time, I think. Possibly more. Somebody correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But I know he can hit at least 3 of your towers, turning them into sandcastles. I thought that was kind of funny, actually, and he kind of gets some bonus points in my book for that. But I think he's no higher than Myconid on this same tier list here. The Paragon. Oh, baby, a triple, because there's 3 of these guys coming out. Honestly, I thought this was one of the most unique and fun boss fights that I've ever had in a while. The conclusion to the main campaign of Kingdom Hearts Vengeance was actually pretty climactic, in my opinion. Personally, I thought it was great. I kind of wish they did a little bit more with those Paragons. I feel like they could have added some extra features into the level to kind of make it a little bit more difficult. I love how they included the archers on the wall. Having King Dennis face off against Vez'nan and their little dialogue battle was super cool. Roasting each other and, trying to reason with one another. I like the part where Vez'nan just tears down the wall with his soul impact spell. And then I also love the part where you have the mortars to deal with. It kind of gives another element of challenge to the level. They're disabling your towers. You might have to use gold to, re-enable some of them quicker, right? If you're in a bit of a pickle or a bind. I liked that it gave you that option. It's not just, hey, another boss disabling your towers. No, you can repurchase them more immediately. So Paragon is probably one of the better boss fights, in my opinion. I'm going to put it at S tier. All right, I know this is probably a controversial pick for a lot of you guys, but it's not S+. It's not the best boss fight in the world, but it definitely is one of the better ones in the franchise. I'm going to pick Quinson next to deal with. Quinson, okay, the level of the Temple of Sakra actually is kind of a difficult level, especially when you're doing challenges, and even in vanilla gameplay, I honestly struggled a little bit with this boss on my first attempt. Even on Veteran. Quinson himself is just a meat shield. His Mandarillos that he summons, again, just slightly more buff meat shields than Nazarus Lesser Afrides. Other than the level itself being somewhat difficult and the minions being kind of cancerous at times, not super difficult boss fight. I probably will say that this guy is D tier. I know I have a lot of bosses on the D tier, but it's kind of nuts how that all lines up. Next up on the chopping block, Serogas. Serogas' lair. Interesting, however, this kind of makes the Spider Goddess boss fight redundant. Serogas herself is literally just the world's giant, fattiest meat shield ever. She has over 20,000 hit points on Veteran. A ridiculous attack, but walks super, super slow. Takes the longest path possible to get through. And is not very difficult to kill, regardless of whether you're using archers only, or artillery only, or even barracks only. You can do the level with barracks only, believe it or not. But Serogas herself is not a very difficult boss fight. I like the scenery. That does give it some bonus points, but it's not the best boss fight in the world. Honestly, kind of a bit of a lazy boss fight, if you ask me. I'm actually going to put her in F tier. She's not my favorite boss in the world, and she's not very good. Ah, yes, you guys knew it was going to come around eventually. I'd have to rank my own boss. All right, so Pollux the Wise. The minions are difficult to deal with. Early game is a bit of a struggle if you don't know what you're doing, and actually this level took me a number of attempts to beat before I could beat it on Impossible No Lives Lost, but once I unlocked the secret to getting past the early game, the rest of it was pretty much just a joke. There were a couple waves here and there that kind of caused me to panic a little bit, but other than that, not super difficult. The boss himself, again, just a meat shield. So he levitates out of the pond, and then he teleports around if you don't manage to kill him using a blazing gem. The first time I faced the Pond of the Sage level, I was playing on Android, and I didn't have all the premium towers. So he actually did end up teleporting a couple of times before I was able to kill him. He actually got pretty close to the exit. But if you have the premium towers, if you have Blazing Gem plus literally any barracks, he's not even going to get to the first teleportation point. You're going to kill him very quickly and very easily. All right. So overall, not a super difficult boss fight, but I love the music. I love the artwork. The minions early game are very challenging if you don't know what you're doing, so you need to watch out for that. But otherwise, it's somewhat relatively easy level. I don't think it's the worst boss fight in the world. I don't think it's the best either. But based off of all these factors, ladies and gents, I think I'm going to go ahead and put myself at C tier. Just kind of in the middle, slightly on the lower end of things, but not, super crazy. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and wrap things up. I hope you guys enjoyed this tier list today, and certainly stick around for more tier lists in the future. I will be uploading those as I'm able to, but hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Comment down below if you guys agree with any of this tier list, if you disagree with any of this tier list. Again, I would just like to say this is not an objective tier list. This is all just personal opinion. So hopefully, you guys understand and realize that is the case, and can respond or, respect my opinion even if you don't agree with it accordingly. But in any case, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your night. This is Pollock's Wise. Peace out.